Well, here we are. My roof rack is all done. Did a total of 4 trips out to Speedy Metals, 3 of which I picked up material. 1 of them they were out, so I just placed the order for it. But yeah, it's mosquitoes around here are a pain. Anyways, let me go show you some of the before and after pictures. I just finished taking those. I finished taking the after pictures. I didn't do the before ones. There is a slight difference because the before pictures had the top on, and it's a lovely day out right now, and so I've got the top off. I also had a driver's door, which right now I don't have either. So let's just start over at the front of the vehicle, just looking head on. And here we've got the before and the after. It's a big item, yes, no doubt about that. But it's done. We then go off to the side once again, before, after on the side there. And now let's look at the hinge on the windshield. Got a before and after. Fortunately, although I should have thought of this in advance, you can actually just buy the hinges themselves for the windshield. What I should have done was just bought a hinge and just welded the bracket onto the part that's actually attached to the windshield, so that when you fold the windshield down, you fold down those front brackets with it as well. But I wasn't thinking that far ahead, and it wasn't until after that I was looking online for something else and I saw those, and I'm like, oh, I should have just gone with those. But as is now, there's the 2 bolts that go through, just right through where the bolts were for the windshield, and then you access those on the inside of the dash, which you have to take off completely, as you will have seen me do like 3 times. I do not have the support going down to the lower hinge yet, because I'm not sure if I actually need it or not. I'll find out as time progresses. Progressing to the rear shot, what I did here, we have a before and an after. And if you remember from the first couple of videos, I was wondering how should I go stick the rear bracket on there. Well, I just decided on sandwiching the vehicle, or the tub of the vehicle, between 2 1/8-inch thick pieces of steel plate, and then just bolting that together on both sides. I've looked at numerous different other roof racks that are available and how they mount and things. Front windshield hinges are a real common spot, and then on the back I've seen quite a few that just bolt onto the tub of the vehicle. So I'm not too worried about that. Again, I'm not going to have a lot of weight on top, just the rack and a tent. So not too worried about the weight aspect of it. I did notice driving out here that it's just loud, but I guess that's to be expected. And then progressing on to just the rear shot, I've got a before and an after. And I did have the wall on the roof rack go to the backside so that the tent will open up over the roof.
So let's try and do a brief overview of basically what happened every day so that if this is the only video you watch, you still know everything I did and you don't have to spend a considerable amount of time watching all of the other videos. So on day one, I was working on the side rails. They are two 5-foot long pieces of 1x1 square tubing, and then they have 3-inch spacers in between so that from edge to edge it's 5 inches tall, but from the top of the cross members to the top of the roof rack it's 4 inches, which will then allow for my rooftop tent that in theory will be 4 inches tall to be flush with the sides of the roof rack. So I cut a bunch of the 3-inch spacers. I prepared them for welding by grinding down on the corners of them and such and cleaning them off a little bit from the oil. And I added markings to the 5-foot long tubes for where the 3-inch pieces were going to end up going. And then I tack welded them together. I also cut out the brackets for attaching the front support to the windshield hinge. And then I basically ran out of time on day one. So then I continued on day two. I welded up the other side of the rack for the wall on that, and I was able to just lay it straight on top of the side that I had already done so that I knew my supports were going to end up in the same area and it would be symmetrical from one side to the other. I then ground down some of the welds that I had made to just make sure they were looking good, and then I had to re-weld some of them because I didn't quite have it centered in between the two pieces. I also worked on laying out and cutting some of the corner brackets that will end up connecting the roof rack to my upright supports. They are a 3-inch by 3-inch square with one of the corners cut off going 2 inches down and 2 inches across so that it's square from the 3 inches mark, goes up an inch, and then it cuts in on the 45 to get to the other side. I was not able to weld them up, but I did at least get a few of them cut out that I could stick them together and see how they looked and how it looked like they would fit. I just called in the order for the cross members, which are also 1-inch square tubing, but they have a thinner sidewall. I called that order in, and so on day 3, I went and picked them all up. I had them cut all of them to the 4.5 feet, which they'll end up being as they stretch across. This allows for me to have 3 inches of space on either side of the tent that I can stick like a piece of PVC pipe, and then I can store long skinny objects in there like fishing poles or toilet paper, anything that's light basically, or if I needed to carry a yardstick around with me for whatever reason. After cleaning them off a little bit with some paint thinner to help clean off the oil, and then it helps with the welding because it doesn't have to burn through that, it was time to square off one of the cross members against the side support and weld it into place. Now, having the thinner sidewall on the cross members as opposed to the little side trusses that I made, it did make it a little difficult to do the welding because I'm still rather new at welding. And so going between two different thickness pieces of metal, I did burn through the cross members a couple of times, but I filled in those holes with some more weld, so I think it should be sturdy enough. I will probably end up going over with some black caulk just to fill in those holes and cut down on moisture getting inside and rusting the pipes from the inside out. Now, the size of this was just too big to fit on the table, so I ended up laying it out on the floor to weld it all up. I ended up using two squares that were both set to the same distance that I could push them against the main piece that I had already welded in place, and then put the next cross member down, butt it up against the squares so that they would be nice and parallel as I moved my way up. So then after I had all of those welded on the top and bottom, it was time to test it out and call day 3 a day. So I did. It was a day. Moving on to day 4 was the day of the brackets. I laid down and cut out all of the pieces that I needed for the brackets. I ground down the corners, and because I have 4 corner brackets, each one needs 3 pieces, I had to cut out 12 of those squares. And then because I didn't want to weld them on the inside, because I might put down too much metal and then not have the 1x1s fit nice and snugly into the corners, I went and welded them on the outside. And so to get it that they were nice and square, I found a big old scrap piece of steel and I clamped onto that with the one side piece and then laid the second piece on top of that, and then I welded it together, or I tack welded them first, but that then I could go over it with a bead and make a much nicer weld. On day 5, I mostly spent it finishing up the welds on the roof rack itself. I only did the top and bottom, and so I had to get all the inner corners of those welded up. I also added in the missing 3-inch upright supports so that both sides are actually symmetrical and even. I then ground off all the extra metal from the welds, redid a few of them, and then I brought the roof rack home that I could go paint it all. So it was a rather short day, but I did get some important stuff done, and especially that painting because it was sitting out already, and I noticed wherever I had welded it, it was starting to rust out on me. Or not rust out, but to start to rust. So I got that all painted with Pour 15, so I shouldn't have to worry about that really rusting anymore. I do have to patch some of the holes where the welds were, as well as the end caps, but those are for another day. Day 6 was spent figuring out the front supports. In the process of trying to mount the hinge brackets, I found that I needed to remove the entire dash to access the nuts. So I folded the windshield down, took off the dash, got to the nuts, and was able to remove the bolts. I then found that the holes in my brackets were indeed in the right spot, and I drilled them to the proper size and bolted them in place. After which, I put the dash back on, folded back up the windshield, and I found out that taking it apart and putting it back together actually takes a while. I mean, you can do it all with basic hand tools, but it does take a while. But it's not all that hard. On day 7, I did more work on the front upright supports. I also drilled holes in the corner brackets that they can get bolted to the rack. After clamping them down, I then drilled the holes into the rack. Now I put the holes 2 inches out from the corner and a 1/2 inch from the edge. I also pre-drilled the holes with a smaller bit to make it easier for the larger holes when it came time to put them into the roof rack, because I was doing that with a hand or with a power drill, but by hand. Day 8. I'm almost ready to where the rack will actually be supported, which means I can have the roof up and not feel as bad when it rains. I lined up the rack, making sure it was centered, and then tacked the upright supports to the hinged brackets and the corner brackets. I only tacked them together because I did not want to add a bunch of heat to the vehicle, especially next to the paint job. I figured I can just take it off and then do a much more secure weld onto that. I also started working on the rear brackets. I was able to make the plates that basically bolt next to the car on both sides, and I drilled them. I bolted them to the car. Right now, as you can see in the video, I'm just using a very small bolt, but I will end up upgrading that once I buy the bolts that I need. I then lined up the rear upright supports and welded them to the corner brackets. I just tacked them on again to start off with, but then I was able to take them off just by unbolting them and then put on a nice bead around the corners, as well as on that corner bracket itself, which again I had only tack welded together. I started off day 9 picking up the rest of the hardware that I would need to finish the project.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too.
Bye now.
After arriving at the makerspace, I found a design flaw.
So I may have a slight problem here. I welded this up and I broke the welds, but that's no big deal. In order to take these 2 bolts out, I've got to
fold the windshield down, I think. I can't fold the windshield down because it gets in the way of my windshield. I ended up cutting the upright supports with an angle grinder so that I could take off the brackets and go over all of the tack welds with a more permanent bead, as well as finish painting them. I made sure to round the corners over a bit to remove any sharp points, and then put a nice bead down over the tacks. I put the car back together and headed home. So it's day 10. The last day is here and things are looking good. I really just need to drill the holes in the front upright supports so I can mount them back together after I had to cut them in half. I then head home, take the car apart again, one last time though, and mount the front hinge brackets. I put on the dash, fold up the windshield again, and then I can slide the front supports back together, bolt them back on, and then put on the roof rack. I got my brother to help me put it up, and then I just had to go bolt it all together, and the roof rack was entirely finished. Now for my next project, I've got either the rooftop tent or the trunk organization system, both of which I need to have done by, I believe it's May 20th, when I am taking another camping trip. And this time, hopefully I'll have a nice setup to use. I do have my stove already, so I'll get that going eventually and, get the drawer made for that and all. But that's for a whole nother series, but it's a sneak peek. So I haven't started that at all yet. But now you know what I'll be working on in the upcoming days. So until I start working on that, just stay tuned. It's every Tuesday I post a new video, and I do have a couple in running once I get this project done. So until next time, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I shall catch you all next Tuesday. Thanks for watching.